Okay, that's how I feel this morning. But thank you for being here. We are up in five. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today in this holy season. Can you believe we're a week away from Thanksgiving? Where has this year gone? There has been so much that has been going on this year. I feel like we've lived 5 years in a year, huh? But you know what? Everybody's getting excited about the 2026 elections as we were excited about the 2025 elections. Remember the New York City race alone. More people voted in that race than voted in a mayoral race since 1969. That's almost 60 years, everybody. That's a lot. There's a lot of interest in the voting process. Now, the question is, will you have access to the vote? The question is, who will you be voting for when you do vote? Because this gerrymandering thing is very real. And the gerrymandering fight, we really saw it amplified by the Texas state legislators who really made a run toward freedom. They said, look, we know we're in the minority, but you need to know what's going to happen here. The Republicans, with their supermajority, are now going to slice and dice this state so that we lose at least 5 Democratic seats. And Black and brown people in particular are the ones who will be unrepresented. So this is something that David Daley, senior fellow at Fair Vote, New York Times bestselling author, rat effed, unrigged, and anti-democratic. I really encourage you to get the trilogy because it takes us through the voting process, how the right wing have really engineered uh, the takeover of the government. On every level, they said you can have the presidency. They really turned it in their own into a ceremonial post, if you will. They said, but the power's in the states. So, actually, we're going to take over the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, but we're going to take over these states at every level because they determine who goes to Washington. So much power is in the states with the governors and with those representatives. So much. The majority and minority leaders in the states. You need to know what's going on in your state. Well, now we go back to Texas, where the gerrymandering began. David Daley has been telling us for the longest time that this was the plan. But something happened. A funny thing happened on the way to the voting booth. What happened with the courts? It seems that the administration's plans to redistrict in Texas have been thwarted. David Daley.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. They've been thwarted temporarily.
Mhm.
What happened was lots of people thought that the fight for Congress next year would be fought on a pretty competitive map, right? That it looked like Democrats would need to flip 3 seats to take back the House. And so Donald Trump got on the phone. He called up Texas and he said, "Well, why don't you do a mid-decade redistricting? Why don't you draw yourselves a new congressional map in the state and make it so Republicans gain 5 additional seats." And so they went ahead and they did that, and they did it, as you say, by cracking and packing Black and brown communities around, in South Texas, in Houston, and a a federal court put an end to this the other day. A federal court said that this is an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. And they said that the 2026 elections are going to have to be run on the previous map, which, don't get me wrong, is still a pretty big Republican gerrymander, but it's not as big as the one that it looked as if voters were going to be casting ballots on in 2026. Now, the fight isn't over yet. This is going to be appealed. Texas has already appealed this straight to the U.S. Supreme Court. So we will see what happens. But for the moment, this is a big win for voters.
Do you see this having implications for other states?
It's complicated. We will see. Um, the really interesting thing, right, is that California voters went to the polls in November, and they said that they were going to draw a new gerrymandered map in California to retaliate for what Texas had done. Now that map is also being challenged in court, and we will see what happens there. The Republicans in that case are saying that that map is an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. We'll see if that holds up. But for the moment, the 5 seats that the Democrats took in California would give them a small edge over what Republicans have managed to do so far. Now, I think it's dangerous to do math in the second inning of a baseball game, right? Um, this is going to, the Texas case is going to end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll see what happens. There is another Voting Rights Act case at the U.S. Supreme Court. This is the Calais versus Louisiana case that we have talked about here in the past. Has to do with whether or not drawing majority minority seats is constitutional under the Constitution. Constitutional under the Constitution. I don't know why I said that. You know,
Well,
more
no, I mean,
coffee,
no,
but
no, because
yeah, but
it seems like they're moving in a direction. And
yeah,
I'd
it's
like to talk about in a follow up question. It seems like they're moving toward a reconvening of the states, if you will. You know,
uh,
it just seems like they have a lot of things going on at one time.
there's a lot of things going on at once. Republicans who had been looking at doing mid-decade redistricting around the country, and they have already enacted a new map in Ohio that gives them 2 additional seats, a new seat in Kansas City, Missouri, that took a previously historical black seat, cracked it into thirds, stretched it out across the entire state, created 3 Republican districts, and they've added a Republican seat in North Carolina. So that's 4 seats so far. Some states that looked as if they were going to go ahead and redraw, including Indiana and Kansas, for the moment are suggesting that they might not. That leaves Florida really as the big player, where you could still see somewhere from 3 to 5 additional Republican seats. Virginia, now on the Democratic side, is talking about a new map. I think that there's too many roadblocks to actually get there, but it's not impossible. So there's a lot of things in the air, but really the next crucial decisions are going to be made by the U.S. Supreme Court in terms of how they look at this Texas case, and then how they rule on the Louisiana case. Because if they upend what's left of the Voting Rights Act and the protections of majority minority seats, you could see Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi, all of those states could go ahead and redraw next year. So it's still just the second or third inning of this baseball game.
Okay, well, what does the subsequent inning look like?
It's hard to say. I think that the Republicans have the advantage here from a partisan perspective, just because they have more options. There are more states where they can do this than Democrats have. It's very difficult for Democrats to make any additional moves in New York and Virginia. They've already really maximized what they can do in places like Maryland and Illinois. Republicans just have more options, more on the table. And now it comes down to the U.S. Supreme Court, which, in so many ways, the court is why we're in this mess, right? The court has had options in the past for helping us escape this, nonsense of partisan and racial gerrymandering. Instead, they have made it easier, and they've made it easier for Republican states to put their thumb on the scales in favor of their voters, time and again. So we'll see what the court does this time. But if history rhymes, I think it is, dangerous to be looking to this court for protection for voters, really almost at any point in time.
I mean, which case might make it to the Supreme Court?
Well, both of these cases are going to end up at the Supreme Court. The Texas case, because it's a voting case,
Mhm.
um, goes on appeal directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. So that case is now in the hands of Justice Alito. And Justice Alito will decide whether he wants to put an administrative stay on the decision that came out of the lower court, pending additional schedules for arguments at the U.S. Supreme Court. And the decisions, it's been wild. The judges, it was a 3-judge panel that decided the Texas case, and they clearly all despise each other. The rulings are a mess on both sides. They are, it was a 2-1 decision. And the judge in dissent is furious that they didn't give him enough time to write his dissent, that they rushed their decision out. It's wild. You don't usually see this kind of hatred and enmity spilling out in federal court decisions, but this is going to go straight up to SCOTUS, and we'll see what they do. We'll see if they have time to, Texas has a schedule. Candidates want to run for office next year. They want to know what districts they're running in. So this is going to have to go fast. The Louisiana case, the court has already heard arguments in this back in October. And I imagine that you could see a ruling from the court sometime in late January or early February. Because again, if they're going to overturn this piece of the Voting Rights Act, all these other states have schedules. And so if Alabama and Louisiana and South Carolina are going to draw new maps, they want to be able to do it far enough ahead of the next election so the candidates can get ready and mount campaigns. So all of this will be coming down in the next few months.
When we're looking, what is the importance of accurate representation? Maybe that sounds like a very simple question, but clearly it's not, because the pushback is just so ferocious.
No, it matters a lot, right? I mean, we have a system of single member districts in this country, right? If a state has 10 seats, it's divided up into 10 districts, and you have 10 different elections. But, as we all know, with gerrymandering, how you draw those lines can determine winners and losers. What you do if you're gerrymandering is you might draw a map that packs as many of the other side's voters into one district. And by collecting them all there, you give them one seat that they win overwhelmingly, and then you take the rest for yourself. So that is, it is a way that you can take a 50-50 state and you can make it, 90-10. If you look at a state like Illinois, it's a blue state, but it is not a 100% a blue state. The 2-party congressional vote in Illinois in 2024, 53% for Democrats, 47% for Republicans. But the Democrats have 14 of the 17 seats because of how the lines are drawn. That's 82% of the seats with, 53%
as opposed to 53% of the vote.
And
now wait a minute.
And there are Republican states
no, stop right
where that goes the other way.
Stop right there.
Yeah.
Look, is that fair?
No, it's outrageous.
I mean, come on. I mean, look, I want fairness. I don't like to lose, David.
No.
But I don't like to be cheated.
Right.
And I live in Illinois. I grew up in Illinois, and it was always a moderately Republican state. I mean, it didn't bother me at all because you had a tyrannical Democratic Party that I grew up under in Chicago.
Yes.
And you could work with the Republicans here. So I've seen people who, and as quite frankly, given Black interest, we've had to float between parties.
Right.
We've been this, we've been that, we've been that, we've been this. And I think that all people, quite frankly, our political views are more nuanced.
Yes.
Than we see. And I'm just seeing there's so much unfairness here.
Oh, absolutely,
You
right?
know, I mean, when Gavin Newsom, who I like him personally, have a lot of respect for him, but you know what my father said, and he speaks sparingly, but what he says is meaningful, David. My mother said it frightened her half to death because he keeps the news on like all day, all night. That's what he wants to hear. And he heard him say, "We've got to fight fire with fire." And she said, my father popped up. This was just a few months ago, and he said, "Jackie, you fight fire with water." And she looked. She said, "What did you say?" He said, "You heard me. We can't fight unfairness with unfairness, David." I mean, it's become this partisan mess.
It's a mess, right?
I mean, do
And
you understand? You understand what I'm saying?
oh, 100%. I mean, the I because we have a national congressional map in some ways, right? Whatever one state does affects all of the others. So when there's unfairness in Texas, I understand why California says, well, we're going to counteract that and
Mhm.
we're going to be unfair too. But who loses in this? It's voters that lose. If you are an independent, if you're a Democrat who lives in Texas, you are losing here. If you're a Republican in California, I mean, Gavin Newsom is drawing a 48-4 map in California. California is blue, but that's 94% of the seats, right? I mean,
California's Los Angeles and it's Carmel and it is Orange County too.
there's a lot of people in California with a lot of different political views.
Yeah.
48-4 is not representative of the state. And, North Carolina has fewer seats, but the 11-3 Republican map there is not a representative either. And
Mm-mm.
what happens when you have non-competitive seats is you get more extreme people in office who don't actually represent people either, but you can't beat them because the lines are drawn in such a way that one side or the other wins. That means the only election that really matters is in the primary. When the primary election matters most, those are low turnout, close to independence usually. And if you've got 12 candidates running in it, somebody can win that race with 15%, right?
Yeah.
And so if somebody who represents a fraction of a fraction ends up going to Washington to represent everybody, but they have no accountability because they can't be beaten in a general election. So, we find ourselves in this mess for a lot of reasons, but the perverse political incentives created by non-competitive districts, wildly one of them.
So help me to understand what happens. Give me two different scenarios.
Yeah.
If the Give me the two ways in which the Supreme Court can rule in the Louisiana case. And give me consequences. Just
Sure. Well, if what I think the Supreme Court will do in the Louisiana case is what they've done to the Voting Rights Act case in previous cases. You leave the words there because they're pretty words and they look nice on the wall,
Mhm.
but you pin and mount it in such a way that it can't be used. So I think what they will do is they will add an additional test for the use of race when drawing lines that makes it almost impossible to actually do that. And so if they go ahead and take these protections away, if they say you cannot use race to draw districts at all, even if what you're trying to do is to use race to ameliorate the um, effects of racism in the past, and to assure that communities who have been cheated out of votes and representation have it. If that kind of backwards world is what the U.S. Supreme Court returns us to, then all of these southern states will be able to do partisan gerrymanders. There's a reason why Alabama, right? So all summer long, the states that could draw new maps have been doing so.
Hmm.
Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, Texas. Um, there's a reason why Alabama has not, right? They have a Republican trifecta. They have 2 Democratic seats. They could easily draw a map that was all Republican there if they wanted to. What stands in their way is the Voting Rights Act. What stands in their way um, is Section 2 of the VRA that says essentially that if there is a community of color in sufficient compact numbers in a state where there is a history of racially polarized voting, they have to have an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choosing. If that goes away, then you could have a 6-0 map in Alabama. You could have, an automatic map in Mississippi, in Louisiana, in South Carolina. You could see the Memphis, Tennessee district disappear. You might see Georgia go in and redistrict. Texas could take another bite at the apple. If they allow what's left of the Voting Rights Act to stand and to be enforced, then I don't think you will be able to see that kind of redistricting next year. But my guess is that there's at least 4 and maybe 5 votes on the court to, head in the direction of saying, time's up on the Voting Rights Act. We've had 60 years. All this has been fixed.
Well, essentially, that is what John Roberts said. We've had a
Yeah.
black president and things have been fixed. What happens to America if that, yeah, well, it does make you kind of go,
I mean, the history, the question of America since our founding has been whether a multiracial nation can become a multiracial democracy. And the answer has gone back and forth, and I would suggest that it's the Reconstruction amendments to the Constitution after the Civil War and the Voting Rights Act that in many ways ought to be considered to be our founding documents. These are the highest articulations of the ideals of what it means to be a multiracial democracy. And this court has been slowly wiping them away and trying to return us to a different time. I mean, if these protections get wiped away, I think you would have a South that was 100% white, conservative, rural Republican. There would be no, you would look at the map and it would be 100% red. And we are not a nation in which any place is 100% anything.
anything.
And what we really need is a system that allows for proportionality, that allows for fairness, that allows for real representation and meaningful elections for everyone, including Democrats in Texas and Oklahoma, including Republicans in Massachusetts and Maryland and Illinois and California and New York, independents everywhere. There's a way to do this, right? But we just need desperately to have a national standard. And we probably need to rethink the very nature of it all and think about multi-member districts and, things that will work much better.
Then, then help me to understand. I don't know where that is, but um, just as we're looking at, I'm wondering if that's socially sustainable. If that, just to have this, because the young people have changed. They've moved, David. I mean, they're willing to try out democratic socialists. You've got the young on the right and the left, who they want they want a completely different Middle East policy. We never thought we'd see that in our lifetimes, right? I mean, there's so much that has changed, and I'm just wondering if the Supreme Court, or I mean, if the if they are, I mean, to me, they're making rulings. They're making rulings against the future.
That's the reason why these justices are there.
Okay. Thank you. That's brilliant. What do you want us to know as I'm about to bring up Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds? Of course, he was one of those representatives. He's second in power. But the
I think
Democrats
that's
talk.
amazing. I am so grateful to
Here he is.
Reynolds. I think the fight that these Texas Democrats led focused national attention on this issue in such a clear and important way. I mean, I've been out here screaming about redistricting and gerrymandering for 10 years, and never as effective as what these lawmakers were able to do by standing up, speaking out, and making good trouble. And I think that this is still going to be a long, illegal road ahead of us. I don't know what is going to happen at the U.S. Supreme Court, but I know that we are talking and thinking about this in a much more serious and important way because of the collective work and fight of these lawmakers in Texas. So I thank you for it.
Well, I thank you, and I want everyone to get this trilogy because I think you need to know. Get the book. Yes, Rat Act. It is what you think it is.
Amen.
You need to get Unrigged, and you need to get Anti-Democratic. I appreciate you that you really take us beyond the realm of the conspiracy. You know, Dr. King said, "Well, uh, while evil men plot, good men must plan." And these are not conspiracies. That's what Rat F shows you, that there was a plan constructed, it was architected, it was put in place, and it was enacted. And we're living through it. And I just don't know how the Democrats missed it. We lost 1,000 plus seats during the Obama administration alone. And these people did it. Our eyes were wide open, or were they wide shut? I don't know. David, what would you like to say before you go?
I think that's great. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Reynolds, and with my thanks and appreciation.
Much love and many blessings to you.
Thanks,
Well, David,
everybody.
let me thank you for your kind words, and I want to thank you for all the great work that you do. I've been a big fan ever since Santita introduced me to the work that you do, and it's so powerful and insightful, and you're definitely a national treasure. And we just want to, I say we as Texas Democrats are inspired by the work that you have done and continue to do. So you gave me kind words, but I'm certainly grateful for your leadership over the many years that you put in and the hard work and raising the awareness so that people aren't asleep at the wheel. And we need more freedom fighters like you, willing to speak truth to power and put it all out there in such an insightful way. And I encourage others to read your work.
It's very kind. I
Say
thank
this,
you for that.
I will say this as he goes, because as soon as I told Reverend Jackson about his book, Rat After, that's when we met. He said, "That's what he said. What is this title?"
Yeah, well,
And he said, "That's exactly what it is." He said, "Get him." I said, "Well, I got him for Sunday," and I
let's
was
go.
very excited. And every time we talk about voting, he wants to pivot to David and his work. And so just want you to know you are in his heart and on his mind, David Daly. And he's so grateful to you for the work that you are doing, because you bring information to us that we don't have. That's why I wanted the people from Texas to see you and hear your work, because when they heard it, they said, wait a minute, we didn't know all of this was going on. See, and I know you might feel like I feel like I'm a broken clock. I'm like, no, you're not. You're giving people information that they just don't have. So
Well,
thank you, David Daly.
thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks,
Bless
everybody.
you. Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, what is going on in Texas? What is your interpretation of this ruling?
Well, Santita, the ruling was met with such enthusiasm and joy. It was like Christmas being celebrated early because that was a gift that I was praying for, that the court would find in our favor because we laid out the record with the hearings that were had, with the testimony on the floor. We were very strategic at the efforts. And I just want to back up just quickly to tell people when we broke quorum, we knew that we couldn't stay out forever. We broke quorum to David's point that he was just making to raise awareness, to make this a national issue, that no, this doesn't just impact Texans. This will come to your state. This could impact the nation and our democracy. And it did. And because we broke quorum and raised awareness, we saw California respond in kind. And when we had raised the awareness, and you were very helpful, Santita, and Rainbow Push was very helpful. we had a national platform, and we were able to get the message out there about the kind of discrimination and racial gerrymandering that Trump had ordered Abbott to do.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that awareness, this became a issue, mainstream issue. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, talk radio, print, social media. It was very, it went viral. And that was what we wanted to do. The next step we wanted to do was to get back to the legislature, because there was a window that we had to get prepared for our lawyers to be able to present the case in court, that they would be able to rule before the election. So we knew that there was a sweet spot. We accomplished the first goal, then we went back and built the strong record on the House floor that they were ultimately able to use in court, and we got the decision back 2-1. A Trump appointee was the one who wrote the majority decision that said that Texas racially discriminated in the drawing of these maps. And it was a very strong opinion that I read. And I wore my Black Lives Matter, Black Voters Matter shirt today, because in essence, the court in essence was saying that these maps definitely discriminated, racially gerrymandered against African Americans and Hispanics.
Well,
The
wait a
things
minute.
we have been saying.
Let's go back to what was decided. I mean, and how you interpreted it, because you're on the ground in Texas, and indeed you broke quorum,
Right.
in anticipation of some kind of ruling. It could have gone in another direction.
Correct.
Did the courts decide who? Well, who was on the courts? Because David Daley said it's a 3-person court, and there's a lot of antipathy amongst the judges. So, the ruling was kind of all over the place. That is to say, in terms of the thinking of the judges, what was decided?
So 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat were on the court. 1 Republican appointee by Trump was wrote the opinion, a scathing opinion of the state, and a Democrat. And I haven't read the dissent yet, but there's a dissent by the other Republican judge. So it's a 2-1 decision. This will now, as David stated, will be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. But basically, the opinion confirmed that the maps were drawn in a racially discriminatory way in violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that you cannot intentionally draw districts that would dilute and what we term crack and pack Black and brown districts. The court specifically stated that the 9th and the 18th congressional district, that's Congressman Al Green of the 9th congressional district. The 18th, unfortunately, doesn't have representation, but previously was served by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee until her death, and then most recently, Congressman Sylvester Turner until his death. That they basically packed those 2 districts into one, and effectively took Al Green's 9th congressional district and made it into something else. But basically, they did it by cracking and packing African Americans, so they couldn't elect a candidate of their choice in the current 9th congressional district that Congressman Al Green. They said the same thing with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's district, Congressman Mark Vesey's district. The 3 African American districts, the court said, yes, this is racial gerrymandering. And then there were 2 other Latino districts that the court ruled that way. So ultimately, the court confirmed everything that we were saying to you and others, screaming from a microphone for everyone that would hear. The state of Texas is violating the voting rights by intentionally diluting the strength of African American and Hispanic voters. African Americans, I've said it, I'll say it again, more African Americans in Texas than any other state. We should have more representation based on the 2020 census, not less. So what they did was make it even worse than it already was. It was already bad. They just made it worse because this was Trump saying, I need 5 seats. The only way I'm going to get these 5 seats is by hook and crook And I don't give a damn about disenfranchising Black and brown communities because they're not voting for me anyway. So take those 5 seats, and whatever you do, they need to be Republican. So the way they drew them was like a jigsaw. There's no continuity. There's no communities of interest. They basically drew a map disenfranchising Black and brown voters so that they would be able to elect more Republicans, more white Republican representation in Texas to maintain power in Congress, because Trump doesn't want a Democrat majority in the House because they would have subpoena power. They would be able to hold him accountable and slow down his MAGA agenda in his last 2 years in office and basically render him ineffective to push his will. So it would give checks and balances on the US Senate and President Trump. So this is a big, huge deal. We're celebrating now with caution because we know the US Supreme Court has a recent history of turning a blind eye to the Constitution. I'm very concerned, Santita, as I talk to you today, that the US Supreme Court could reverse it. And we're right back in this spot. But we're optimistic.
If the Supreme Court, I have 2 questions for you.
Mhm.
If they reverse this decision, and see, because this precedes President Trump. In fact,
Yes.
this has really the Trump agenda. No. It's a right-wing agenda. It's an oligarchical agenda. They have an agenda because the corporate world wants to hold our government captive. I mean, our government is the biggest business in the world, and they're trying to mount a hostile takeover, take over the post office, take over everything that could be profitable, but because it's for the public good, it is not profitable. But they don't lose money, but they see where they can make money. And they see where, a democracy, well, that's a little inconvenient because that was something that the founding fathers debated. So they said, you know what, we're going to put brakes in place. We're not going to have a full democracy. We will have a republic, a constitutional republic, and we will have democratic elements, but we're going to put things in place because, the great unwashed, we don't know if we need to let them have their say completely. Because David Daley wrote the book Rat Eft. His research started in 2008. You saw Reagan, who was the face of the oligarchs in 1980, and really before then, because they pulled him out of Hollywood and made him a corporate spokesperson. And they worked with him and made him quite palatable to the public. And they were eventually, it was like a 30+ year project, and they got him into the presidency, right? I'm simply saying that there is a broader agenda. And now you have young people in this administration, Representative Reynolds, younger than you, who the vice president is 40. The spokesperson for the White House, she's 25 or 26. I mean, everybody he has around him is really, really young. Jared Kushner might be in his early 40s. I mean, when you look at the figures that they've brought along, and we're sitting around reminiscing about Nancy Pelosi's almost 90. Now, mind you, I'm not willing to throw out the institutional knowledge of a Nancy Pelosi, of a Jim Clyburn. These people, you need them. You really, really do, because they understand the process. They understand the system. But I'm saying that there's something that's bigger than all of them. And if we don't get our arms around this, eventually poor white people won't be able to vote, because we're going to go back to a time when poor, unpropertied white people could not vote. It doesn't just impact Black and brown people, Representative Reynolds. I know I just had a long treatise on this, but it's like helping them to wake up, because you need to be really clear. The oligarchs don't necessarily believe that you need to govern yourself. They want to have smart cities. Don't you have a smart city that Elon Musk is constructing in Texas?
Yes.
So that's a corporate city. It's a corporate-owned city. So
That's
who's
right.
going to be the mayor? I mean, come on. Who'll be able to sway a congressional election?
Oh, obviously, we know that's what he wants.
I'm just saying. So it's like, wait a minute. And so if the Voting Rights Act, if they overturn this Texas case on appeal with the Supreme Court, with a justice, with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who believes that the Voting Rights Act is illegitimate, what happens in Texas? And as you see it, what will happen all over the country? I know I've gone a long way
No,
home,
no,
but
no, no. You needed to paint it out and make it clear so people understand. If the Supreme Court does that, then basically they give a green light to other states to disenfranchise, particularly anybody they want to, Black, Hispanic, Asian. They would have carte blanche and free reign to just do whatever hell they want to do when it came to voting and elections. And that is very frightening because voting and elections are the bedrock of our democracy. And so goes that, so goes the fabric of what we're supposed to stand for in terms of free and fair elections, to elect people of our own choosing and a candidate of our choice to represent us in this democratic republic. If the Supreme Court rules this way, it could be Armageddon for other states to basically just go crazy with how, because they would basically, they kind of tried to tiptoe around it because they didn't want to be found in violation of the Voting Rights Act. But if you take away that, they would go even further. They wouldn't have to hide anything. They could do it in plain sight. And so that would make it more egregious than it already is. It's egregious now. It would only get worse, Santita. There would be no um, protection for basically discriminating against African Americans or Asians or any other ethnic group because the Supreme Court would say, hey, it's lawful. If you take away the voting rights, I want to get people to remember the reason why we have the Voting Rights Act in the first place is because they had poll taxes, they had literacy tests, they had shenanigans that kept people of color and poor people, women, from voting, period. So if you said, Santita, if you weren't a white landowner, then you likely weren't able to vote. We could find ourselves in a throwback to those dark days if the Supreme Court messes up this decision. I have very little confidence because they have been playing politics and not following the rule of law. I'm very concerned that they want to achieve a desired outcome and therefore they will subvert the legal precedent that should protect and uphold this lower court's decision. Clarence Thomas is itching to gut it. He was complaining that the Supreme Court should not have delayed the Louisiana case. He is eager. The man who is sit in the seat that Thurgood Marshall once sat in, which is I can just see him turn it over in his grave every time Clarence Thomas writes an opinion or opens his mouth because he's the polar opposite of everything he stood for and fought for as a civil rights lawyer and as a Supreme Court justice. Clarence Thomas is itching to join John Roberts and others to eviscerate and weaken and possibly end the voting rights as we know it. So yes, Santita, this would be a major catastrophic setback for our democracy and protecting people who look like us at the ballot box and being able to elect candidates like your brother, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, or other Democratic candidates or other African American and Latino candidates. It would definitely wipe many of them out, particularly in the South. They would be wiped out with
or
the
white progressives, or
or white
or white populists. See, because because to me, the white populist is dangerous. That's why the Democrats took out Bernie. Because he was reaching for the least of these too, and that was a problem.
That's true.
That was a real problem, and that's why I'm saying, I don't want anyone who just looks like me. Because
No, no, true.
no, I'm just saying Clarence Thomas looks like me,
Right.
and you know what? No, 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 no. I need someone who it's not skin, it's kin. I don't do skin worship. I'm like, wait a minute, we don't have a kinship here. He is a lie. He is a white supremacist. And
Yes.
I say that with full confidence, with conviction, because he allies himself and aligns himself with them and that thinking. That's it. Doesn't mean I don't like him personally. I've never met him, but I've heard good things about him personally. I know people who know him and they like him, and that's great. But on the politics, to me, he's very dangerous. On the politics, Alito is dangerous.
Absolutely.
Politics, John Roberts, whose his whole career has been predicated on gutting the Voting Rights Act. We only needed it because we got, well, at least black men got the right to vote after slavery ended in 1870. And President Johnson said, wait a minute, but we need to have an act to make the amendment to the Constitution real. The Constitution was amended to give black men the right to vote. Okay? Because if we're going to be very specific about this, Representative Reynolds.
That's right.
That was why you have the Voting Rights Act, because what they're doing is unconstitutional. You're a lawyer. Help me.
No, you're absolutely right, Santita. And the problem is that these Supreme Court justices, they're brilliant, but they are doing everything they can to make interpretations of the law to achieve a desired outcome. And if the outcome is that they want to end the Voting Rights Act and they want to basically dismantle it in its entirety, then they can reason it with words and wordsmith through their own interpretation. And as long as they have the majority in their votes, they can do it. That's it. And there's no appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's over. It's over. And one of the great disappointments, Santita, and I have to revisit this. I know you and I and Daryl talked about this before. I am still not over the fact that when President Biden had a Democrat majority in the House and in the Senate, he did not push, just like Trump pushed to get his will done, to get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed, basically re-strengthening the Voting Rights Act that was previously gutted from the Shelby case. That was a big mistake.
Wait, no. Wait, stop. Mistake. Look, we delivered we delivered him to the White House. We delivered him to the White House. There was a meeting with black leadership. It was leaked by The Intercept. And it was so insulting. He said, look, I've given you a black vice president. I'm not doing it anymore. He said that. And they were sitting on the phone with him. It was a Zoom call. It was absolutely insulting. For the record, Reverend Jackson was not in the meeting because, like most meetings like that, he had been excluded. I was time he was, he wasn't that ill. But I said, you know what? I just saw this, and I'm so glad you were not part of this meeting because none of them said a mumbling word. Look. These are the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. There's some simple things we asked about.
That's right.
Because some communities, everything they asked for, they gave the Pentagon extra money that they didn't even ask for. So what are we talking about? That is not a disappointment to me. That's an insult. It's a direct insult because I delivered the White House. I delivered you to the White House, and you did not do what that was part of the deal. See, now we need to stop getting into like me, feel me. I'm tired.
I agree.
That's not what politics is. Politics is quid pro quo. You do for me, I do for you. You do for me, I do for you. That's it. It's about power. It ain't about it. It's not a date, you all. It's a destination. It ain't got nothing to do with love. Nothing. Stop it. So I'm just saying, I'm not disappointed. I am upset about that because look at where we are right now.
No, absolutely. And I remember, Santita, it goes back to when I met you. from the first time we broke quorum in 2021. That's
That's
when
what you
it
meant.
was. Yeah, that was after this. We went to DC to urge Congress to pass this federal voting rights legislation so that states wouldn't be able to do what they're doing. We wouldn't be having this discussion right now, Santita, if they had done that. Now they put it all on Manchin and Sinema, the two Democrats in the Senate. But Biden, he basically put Kamala Harris. He took himself out of the equation. He said, "Well, I'm putting her in charge of this issue and this negotiation." I don't know if you remember that, but
Mhm.
that's what he did. So basically, he people knew that he wasn't so serious about it when he took himself out of the equation. You're right. He basically said, "I'm washing my hands. Kamala, you got it from here." Instead of leaning in as the president to say this is going to happen, and you and doing
What you could have done. What you
power
could have done.
in the pulpit, just like we see Trump do to get his will done. The big beautiful bill. That's not a big beautiful bill, but he has done his will. President Biden, I have
He
the
did his will. He
he
did
could
his will. He did his will.
okay.
It just wasn't mine. How about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, okay, that's fair enough. That's
Okay.
fair enough.
See, I don't believe in giving people all this space.
Yeah, yeah.
See,
Well, the bottom line is he didn't do it. We
yeah.
don't have it. And now we're seeing the impact that it's having on people across the country. Right now, people across the country are hurting and suffering.
Mhm.
The other one was the George Floyd Policing Act. Those were two major monumental bills, one civil rights, voting rights, one criminal justice, neither of which were able to advance after the House had delivered on both under Speaker Nancy Pelosi's leadership. They delivered. They delivered in a major way, and it stalled in the Senate. Now, I can tell you that there could have been a LBJ moment.
Mhm.
A LBJ moment showed you that if you want it done, then you lean in. That's what he did to get the Voting Rights Act that we're
Right.
talking about passed. I've read many documentaries to say that there was so much opposition, but he leaned in and he was not going to let failure be an option, and he got it done.
That's
Biden
right.
did not exert that LBJ lean in history making moment.
And
Uh,
he had the LBJ heft. He'd been on the Hill 4+ decades. He'd been vice president.
yes,
He knew everybody and he knew all of the levers to pull, all of the buttons to push, and he did not do that.
yeah, yeah. I
You
mean
know,
that's transparency.
I literally have about a minute. I'm about to go. We're going
Okay.
to pivot over to something that you might find interesting in this. We're coming up in the next segment. What we're talking about is uh, Epstein, of course, but what people don't look at is his ties to intelligence.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
They're right there in plain sight. Drop Site News has been doing excellent work on that, and a young journalist from Common Dreams is going to talk about that. Just wait a minute, because that has massive implications, massive. But I want to get the closing thought from you about this because this is big. And I think we need to continue to talk about this to unpack this because we should not let what happened in the past 4 years happen again.
Santita, I totally agree with you. If we're learning lessons from this, is that leadership matters, and we need to make sure that when we vet our next president, that we vet a president that is willing to fight, that is willing to, and I'm talking about Democrats. I'm speaking,
Mhm.
Republicans got one right now that's doing their agenda, but I'm saying Democrats, when we vet and we vote for our next president, you best be sure that I'm going to want to support someone that is a fighter, that is willing to go toe to toe and do what needs to be done to push the agenda that you claim to be fighting for. And so this is a time for real leadership. I mean, obviously that is a, you know, a few years away. But for right now, I encourage people to stay engaged, to stay plugged in. It's easy to check out. We're in the holidays. People are suffering, people are hurting. But I encourage people to stay in the fight. Don't give up. Don't give in. Let's continue to work together as a common agent of change to make sure that we don't lose ground, even though the obstacles are there, even though we face insurmountable challenges. Now is not the time to give up or to give in. Now is the time to double down and retool ourselves, encourage one another because people are hurting and suffering. And
Mhm.
during the spirit of Thanksgiving, Santita, I'm very thankful for this platform. I'm very thankful for you. I'm very thankful for the people whose shoulders I stand on, like your father and other freedom fighters that left it all on the line. So I just wanted to say that as I close. Happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays. I'm super encouraged by people like you and others that I've met on this journey that are willing to be open to dialogue about how we prepare ourselves. And hopefully, the listeners are listening with an open ear so that we can grow and learn and not repeat some of the mistakes that we've made in the past. And we will arm ourselves and fight. And I do pray that we have better days ahead. I'm very optimistic and prayerful, and my faith is strong, but faith without works is dead. So
Mhm.
let's continue to work and do our part to make this world a better place for all of us, especially the vulnerable
Mhm.
and the downtrodden. We really have to do more to help build and lift people up. So thank you, Santita.
I
I'm
love you.
looking forward to listening to this other piece about the Epstein and the intelligence.
Intelligence.
That is fascinating. That is
Well,
fascinating.
we have focused on the sex trafficking
Yes.
and the abuse of women. There is no question that that is extremely important. But what is it? What also is of tremendous importance is his ties to intelligence. Perhaps he compromised people. Perhaps that those compromises bent policy. We need to talk about that coming up with Stephen Prager on the Santita Jackson Show. But all my love to you, Texas State Representative Ron
Thank you,
Reynolds, for your
Santita.
courage, for your encouragement, for always being available, for willing to get on that megaphone and speak truth to power and to empower so many people. I'm sending you so much love today.
Thank you. Yeah,
Next up on the Santita Jackson Show, let's talk about the Epstein files, something that people don't really talk about, his ties to intelligence. What what does that mean? Back with more in just a minute. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.